Hi everyone, it's Annaa again. Welcome to episode 3. Today I am going to talk about rings of Saturn. And I had this recent interview where I was asked about what does what's left of me mean to me? What is it about? And I was kind of taken aback by it because it was, well, I'm not used to the spotlight. But it's such a deep personal song that I really didn't know how to answer it. So when I recorded What's Left of Me, it was probably the fall of 2020. I remember coming up with the bass line. This it was unusual because normally I record the guitar first. Sometimes I even do the words first, but this one, What's Left of Me, I started with the bass. And it was this great little, I remember being online when the video chats for a party that we used to have every week. And this bass line just kicked me. It's awesome. I loved it. And I recorded it, and then I had the guitar to it as well. It's got this nice kind of almost this rotary sounding distorted guitar from a Les Paul. And then I added the lead guitar, which is actually this, right? And it was sounding so neat. And finally, when I got around to adding the vocals to it, I remembered back to May, June, July of 2020, my early days of not only the pandemic, but my transition as well, right? And it was a very difficult and dark time. And added to the fact that I lost my support network because of the pandemic, I was afraid of losing me. I was someone who learned how to cope by emulating, say, other people so I could hide the real me. But I was like, which parts were me, which parts were my coping mechanism were difficult to differentiate. And I was afraid that as I stripped those layers down and rebuild me as a new person, as who I authentically am, who I am now, I was afraid that I would lose who I was and that I'd lose everything. So embarrassingly, I can remember reaching out to some people, like, just take me. Just I was reaching out, afraid to lose who I was, and maybe if I could have touched them, they could have held my heart for me while I transitioned, and then come back and they could have helped me through and say, hey, these are your parts, right? But it didn't happen that way. I just made a fool of myself, and I almost lost it. There was a period where I had nothing. I didn't have my music. I didn't have friends. I didn't have my family. And all I had was basically drug abuse. And that filled in a lot of the holes, right? I could pass time. And as my hormone replacement therapy was becoming more and more effective, and finally increased the levels to normal woman's biology, my body was changing, my mind was changing, and I made a very important, probably one of the most important decisions of my life, to go off drugs and alcohol. And I was able to get my music back, and my health started really improving then as well. And when I wrote the lyrics for What's Left of Me, I thought very intensely of this period of my life, right, where I talk about having my heart on a shelf because I was afraid to use it. I was afraid that it wouldn't be accepted by others. So as I'm rebuilding myself, I'm thinking, when I get through this, what's going to be left of me if I get rid of everything that I'm not? Who's there? I didn't know, and I was scared. And I hope you listen to the album. There's some beautiful songs on there, but especially What's Left of Me. It's a very important song to me, and I look forward to being able to share more songs like this. My next album, tentatively called Escape Velocity. So there's kind of a space theme going on, right? As I'm finding space for myself, as I'm letting the universe, how it made me, I'm following the path that it set me on. And it's always been fascinating to me. And when I was younger, I used space Lego, space stories, wanting to be an astronaut, all this science and technology as an escape from not getting to be who I really was. So these albums now, Event Horizon, Eclipse, Rings of Saturn, and now Escape Velocity are kind of going to be a 4-album box set of my transitional days. And as I went from somebody that I'm not into my authentic version, it's a great kind of it's like a scrapbook. It's an album beyond songs of talking about what I went through. And I'm grateful that I've always had that, and I'm grateful that some of you are really enjoying it as well. So Escape Velocity is kind of the rest of the songs that I recorded. I'm adding the vocals to now. The one I'm working on right now that I absolutely love is Why I Try, and I'm working really hard to do such layered harmonies and voices that I find difficult, and I'm being challenged, and it's outside my comfort zone. But it's a beautiful song, and I look forward to talking more about it in the future. I ran a web poll talking about topics that I wanted to talk about, and the one that won was LGBT in the 80s. And this one scared me, but again, out of the comfort zone. I remember the 80s well. We had come off some of the first wins for the LGBTQ plus community. Stonewall in the late 60s and the 70s, we saw the rise of people accepting who they were. But we also had a lot of fear and control used against us. I was looking at the Wikipedia page for LGBT in the 80s, and one of the ones I was reminded of, that early in 1980, in Toronto, Canada, we had the bathhouse raids. We had segregated LGBT away from the community and forced them to go into their own safe areas. And then the cops, using very archaic laws, raided this establishment where these gay men were at. And they were arrested, and and this is kind of the dual side of LGBT in the 80s, and kind of how we're seeing it all being recycled again as a very focused campaign against transgender people who don't deserve this kind of violence and hatred and diatribe against us. But these bathhouse raids, they led to people being arrested. But we also saw some of the first, these marches, these early pride marches in Toronto of 3,000, 4,000, 10,000 people strong, gathering together as a community, right? And this is where the 80s really had its strength, was you saw these grassroots amazing communities get together and really stand up for each other, and they were able to accomplish so much. We saw the first laws that prevented public discrimination against homosexual people. We saw the first, the first parades celebrating who we were, but we also saw the rise and the beginning of a devastating virus called HIV/AIDS that we didn't know what it was early on, and then once we started to understand that was a sexually transmitted disease that unfortunately kind of started off in the gay community, really weaponized and used against us by politicians, especially by the church. Like, shame on all of them for dehumanizing people, for letting people die and suffer in the most horrible ways. But like our community has always done, we stuck together with this heartbreaking level of deaths, especially amongst gay men in the 80s. We saw trans and lesbian people really stand up and support the community, and there were some great grassroots actions, right? There was ACT UP, who really worked hard. They were dedicated. They were brilliant in their approach to get the facts about HIV/AIDS out, right? We had the church trying to deny that, for example, contraception was something that would help. And we had these really informed grassroots groups stand up against that lie and that deception. And they probably saved a lot of people with their message and their support. And as I went through and looking at all the 81, 82, 83, all the years of LGBT in the 80s and some of the major events and the deaths, right? You heard finally about schools that were like, okay, we will allow gay teachers. But quite often too, they say, okay, gay people are accepted, but we can't talk about it, right? Where does that sound familiar? So all of this hate and all this rhetoric against gay people is again being used against all of us again. And my message from the 80s is that we have to stick together. We have to work to bringing the truth. We have to work to, being better than what's being shown to us, because real people are suffering. Real people had suffered, and real people will suffer again. And we don't deserve this kind of hatred. None of us do. And we have to make a difference. We have to stop this. And one of the things that made a difference in the 80s was the humanizing, the stories. You know, we saw the first gay characters on TV. We saw the first kiss. We saw Ellen DeGeneres, for example. Her coming out, right? Amazing musicians like Madonna, like one of the biggest rock stars of all time, really supporting the community, supporting against disinformation, supporting the campaign of these grassroots people. And, you know, we got to where we're at now because so many people came together and cared. But it was a really dark time, and it scares me to think that we would head back there. So I implore all of you, learn about LGBT in the 80s. I'll post a link on my social medias, check it out, do some more research. Feel free to ask questions to me too. I won't tell you how old I am, thank you very much, but I am very much open to sharing my experiences, and I'm grateful to have gotten through it. So thank you very much. I look forward to the next one of these. Everybody take care of each other. I love you all very much. Thank you for listening. Bye.